This is it. We're finally making it. The pound for pound gatekeepers list. Who are the best gatekeepers in the UFC? Before we get into this list, let's define what a gatekeeper is, okay? You have got in the UFC prospects, new people coming into the UFC. We're going to see how they're going to do. Then they become contenders. Contenders is somewhere in that top 10, top 15, has a chance at one day fighting for a title, maybe is competing for a title. Then you have a champion, and then you have gatekeepers. And gatekeepers are either people who never quite made it to the title or people who are never going to be getting another title shot. So this is what I mean when I'm putting together a gatekeepers list. Who are the hardest fighters to get through on the way to the title? Now, that might be former champions. That might be people who never quite got there. But if you still have a chance at fighting for a UFC title, you are not a gatekeeper. You are still a contender. So, more specifically, what's an example? Alexander Volkanovski. Do I think he's ever going to win another UFC title? Unfortunately, no, I don't. I'm a massive Volk fan. But his next fight will be for a title. And I think he's going to lose that fight against Ilia Topuria. So Alexander Volkanovski is one loss away from being on the pound for pound gatekeepers list. But he's not there yet. So, with that sort of criteria, let's get into this. And keep in mind, I think this is going to be a live list I keep on the channel as well. Just like how the official pound for pound rankings get constantly updated all the time as new champions come and go, I think we can keep a running list of who is the pound for pound hardest gatekeeper in the UFC. So let's start off the list with number 10, work our way all the way up. Number 10 pound for pound gatekeeper in the UFC is going to be Colby Covington. Colby Covington. Now, I know. But I don't think he's ever going to be fighting for a title again. I don't think he's ever going to be fighting for a title again. His division is just too stacked right now. You've got Shavkat, you've got Bilal, you've got JDM, you've got Ian Gary. By the time all these people work their way through their division, I don't see Colby Covington ever getting another title shot, especially with how embarrassing he was in his last performance at a title against Leon Edwards, and considering that he is just straight up ducking contenders that will get in there like Ian Gary. So Colby Covington's going in at number 10 on the pound for pound gatekeeper list. Why is he all the way down there? Well, he's got a weak chin. According to his last fight against Leon Edwards, he hasn't got much of a gas tank. In fact, even in the Usman rematch, he sort of took the first 2 rounds off. So the one thing that he always had going for him, which was just that relentless pressure and gas tank, I don't know if Colby Covington has that anymore. Plus, he's got pillow fists. He never does any real damage. So Colby Covington is going to be kicking off the list as the number 10 gatekeeper in the UFC. Number 9 gatekeeper in the UFC is going to be Chris Curtis, man. Chris Curtis, look, Chris Curtis is a dog, dude. He's a hard guy to beat. He's tough. His stand-up game is great. He constantly is sparring with Sean Strickland. And, you know, it feels like he won that last fight, even though he lost it on paper. Chris Curtis is going to be going on the pound-for-pound gatekeepers list, believe it or not. The one thing that I will say, and the reason that he is down there, is because when you look at his game, he is too one-dimensional. So a rising prospect or an older contender can beat him with a little bit of fight IQ. But if you choose to stand in the ring and bang with him, Chris Curtis is most likely going to be getting the win. So Chris Curtis is going to be sitting at number 9 on the pound-for-pound gatekeeper list. Number 8, a very, very well-rounded and a fighter who is probably going to get angry at even being on this list is going to be Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith has got good enough takedown defense to a point where you need to be a Glover Teixeira or a Magomed Ankalaev, a Dagestani to get him down. He's got a crazy, insane chin. Like, in the cage, Anthony Smith will literally go insane and start talking to demons before you can put him away. Do I think he's ever going to be getting another title shot? No, I don't. So Anthony Smith is slotted firmly in that gatekeeper position. And with how well-rounded his skills are, his scrambling, his jiu-jitsu, his fairly decent takedown defense, I think number 8 is the perfect spot for the kid who thinks he can still win a title 50, 60 fights into his career. Anthony Smith is number 8 on the gatekeeper list. I'm going to pause here really quickly, because if you look down at the subscriber count of this channel, it is less than 200 subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers. And I'm doing a big push. I want to get to 1,000 subscribers before my birthday in the middle of July. I'm not going to say when my birthday is, but I want to do a massive push and try and get to 1,000 subs. So if you scroll down and have a look at this channel and see some content on there that you enjoy, if you've been one of those people that's a ghost watcher, that's people that come back to the channel but haven't clicked subscribe, if you could go ahead and hit subscribe, that would mean so much for me as I push on to 1,000. Mate, grab your bloody mum's phone and get her to subscribe as well, mate. We're doing a huge push. So if you want to help me out and hit that subscribe button, I would really, really appreciate that. Okay, number 7 on the list. Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker. Tough, man. Tough. Well-rounded, yeah? His only losses really are to like the best of the best, man. We're talking like Arnold Allen, Michael Chandler, Islam Makhachev. Like Dan Hooker is a tough day at the office, right? You have got to be disciplined for the full 15 minutes, or heaven forbid, you were at the Apex and main event and you got Dan Hooker in front of you for 25 minutes, right? His chin is scary tough, okay? And you need to put pain and pressure on him right away. You've got to attack Dan Hooker right away with a lot of pressure to put him away. And if you do not do that, if you pitter-patter around and play that game with Dan Hooker and stand with him, he's going to put you through a bloody meat grinder, mate. Dan Hooker is a tough night at the office for anybody. So Dan Hooker is going in as the number 7 pound-for-pound gatekeeper, and he is the quintessential gatekeeper. Any prospect that wants to make it at lightweight has got to go through Dan Hooker, and he's always going to be lurking around that number 9 to 6 range of lightweight. So Dan Hooker's going in there, man. Number 7, Dan Hooker. Number 6 on the pound-for-pound gatekeeper list, Marlon Chito Vera, mate. Marlon Chito Vera, right? Hard striker, good takedown defense, puts in a long pace, fights for 25 minutes, never ever getting another title shot again, Marlon. Don't know what to tell you. You're never getting another title shot again. You got beaten 5-0 in your last one against Sean O'Malley. And if it wasn't for the storyline against Sean O'Malley, you never would have gotten that title shot in the first place. So you are a gatekeeper's gatekeeper. But any prospect that's going to be coming up and facing Marlon Vera is going to be probably facing him in the Apex over 25 minutes in a main event, and it's going to be tough because he can put a hurt on them. He will hurt them real bad. Moving up to number 5. What a perfect spot for number 5. What a perfect spot. Neil Magny, man. Neil Magny. The perfect, well-rounded, but not good enough to be a top 5 fighter. And this gatekeeper list seems harsh in one way, but it's also putting a lot of respect on the fighter's name in another way. Neil Magny has got a good ground game. He's got good takedown defense. He has got great stand-up kickboxing striking at range. He just cannot break the top 5. He's just not a top 5 fighter. But he's such a old school vet and knows how to survive a fight so well. It's very hard to see Neil Magny slipping out of the top 15. He stays in that range, right? So Neil Magny is one of those guys that you have got to really work hard to get through. And number 5 on the pound-for-pound gatekeeper list just sort of feels perfect for a fighter like Neil Magny. Number 4, this one's going to be unpopular. This one is going to be unpopular, but it is what it is. Number 4 is Gilbert Burns. There are just too many. I know. I can see the rage already coming through the keyboard, but same as Colby Covington, there are just too many young guns ahead of him in his division, and he is slipping. He is slipping ever so slightly, but he is slipping to that point where I do not see him getting another shot at a title. So it does put him right there as an old vet that has become a gatekeeper. You know, I would say he's new to the gatekeeper list. I know this is the first time doing it, but he is a new name to the pound-for-pound gatekeeper list, and he deserves to be high up on that list. But there's just too many young guns ahead of him. His grappling is just that step behind, you know, just a step behind. His stand-up striking game is just a step behind, and I'm talking about the contenders that are fighting for a title. And that does make him a red-hot, solid number 4 pound-for-pound gatekeeper. Number 3 on the pound-for-pound gatekeeper list, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, boys. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Think about this, okay? His takedown defense is phenomenal. Phenomenal. He put a hurting on a good clean striker like Kevin Holland. Shavkat Rakhmonov had a really hard time taking Steven down, a really hard time. Plus, Shavkat's the only one to ever submit him. So even when you get him down, what are you going to do with him? He's going to dance around on the outside. He's going to piece you up. He's a crafty vet. He has constantly been fighting in that position. And in his mind, he thinks he is still a step away from a title. I'm sure all these big names do. But Stephen Wonderboy Thompson might be one of the hardest challenges to pass if you are a prospect looking to become a contender. One of the hardest, I would say the top 3 hardest. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is the 3rd hardest pound-for-pound gatekeeper in the UFC, which moves us to number 2. Look, maybe I've been watching just way too much footage on this guy this week, but Edson Barboza. Holy fuck, is he dangerous, right? I think maybe I have been, and I might get some heat for this in the comments, and that's all right. We can rework this list. But Edson Barboza is not just going to be there in the main events. He has got a hell of a chin. It's very hard to put him away. He is very, very good on the ground and getting back up. His grappling has come a long way, and this is the difference between Edson Barboza and the rest of the list, right? The pound-for-pound gatekeeper list. This is the difference between the top and everyone down here. And what puts Edson Barboza at number 2? He will hurt you back. He will really, really hurt you back, right? The other guys, they can take a lot of punishment, give out a lot of punishment, but Edson Barboza, his body kicks, his head kicks, his damage will hurt you back. This is where I sort of like stumble over does Marlon Vera deserve to be a little bit higher because he will hurt you back? But Edson Barboza can finish fights. The only reason Edson Barboza is on this list and not on a contenders list is because I think that he is too old and too far away from working his way back up to a title. But he might be one of the hardest gatekeepers in the UFC. I think he's the 2nd hardest gatekeeper in the UFC. Number 1. Are we ready? The number 1 pound-for-pound gatekeeper in the UFC, as of recording this video, moments before UFC 302, is Henry Cejudo. His time is done. His time is done. There is something that happens to a fighter when you see them lose the way that he lost against Merab Dvalishvili. You cannot be picked up and carried across the cage like a baby. You lose the aura. There is something that happens to certain fighters that once you see them lose, once you see them fall that step behind, everyone else starts to see it, and they become very beatable. Same thing happened to Tony Ferguson. People were scared to go in the ring with him. Now, everyone knows the way to beat Tony Ferguson. And I think Henry Cejudo, once he has lost that aura, and now that he is aged up a little bit and fallen a step behind, I don't see him ever fighting for a title again. The division is just too stacked. He might work his way out of this. I mean, if you're the number 1 pound-for-pound gatekeeper, that means you're a step away from getting back into the pound-for-pound list, the contenders list, the proper people that are fighting for titles. So he's a step away from that. Henry Cejudo, his game is excellent karate striking on the hands, excellent wrestling. He's very, very well-rounded. He barely is on the gatekeeper list, but he is on the gatekeeper list. And Henry Cejudo right now is the pound-for-pound number 1 hardest gatekeeper in the UFC. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit subscribe. Like I said, pushing to 1,000 subs. It's a big goal of mine before the end of July. Who do you think should be on this list? Who do you think I missed? What do you think defines a gatekeeper? There is a lot of conversations that can be had around this list, so put them down there in the comments. I got a feeling this one might start percolating on Twitter, so if you start to see the pound-for-pound gatekeeper list conversation happening out there in the greater MMA world, you were part of it when you came in and watched this video, so thank you very, very much. Also, I'm going to be doing a live stream this weekend during the UFC, so feel free to come in and say hi. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video.